It was a quiet afternoon in the small neighborhood, the kind where time seemed to slow down. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a soft golden glow over the rows of neatly trimmed lawns and colorful flower beds. Birds chirped lazily in the trees, and the occasional car passed by, leaving gentle ripples and puddles from an earlier light shower. All seemed peaceful and calm. In the middle of this serene setting sat a little baby, barely 2 years old, under the shelter of his family's porch. His name was Lucas, a bright-eyed boy with soft curls framing his chubby cheeks. He was the picture of innocence, absorbed in playing with his favorite wooden blocks. One by one, he stacked them carefully, watching the small tower grow taller and taller. Every now and then, he giggled to himself as the blocks teetered slightly but didn't fall. But the sky, once soft and clear, was beginning to change. Dark clouds gathered quickly, shifting from pale gray to deep charcoal. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees and causing the flowers to sway wildly. Lucas's mother, busy inside the house, glanced out the window with a small frown. "Looks like we're in for a storm," she muttered, her voice calm but a little concerned. Just then, the first drops of rain began to fall. Light at first, almost playful, tapping gently on the porch roof. But within minutes, the raindrops grew heavier, pounding on the ground in a steady, relentless rhythm. The peaceful afternoon was transforming into a wet, wild scene. The wind howled softly, and the rain blurred the world beyond the porch. Lucas didn't seem to mind. He was used to the outdoors and didn't feel the rain where he was sitting, safely tucked under the porch. Instead, the sound of the rain seemed to make his little world more exciting. He clapped his hands in delight, listening to the rhythmic tapping and pattering all around him. As the storm raged on, Lucas' attention shifted to something beyond the porch, beyond the garden gate at the edge of the yard. Something was different this time. Amid the noise of the rain, a soft, unusual sound reached his ears. It was faint, almost like a whisper carried by the wind, but clear enough to catch the baby's curiosity. His big eyes searched through the drops, trying to find where the sound came from. Squinting against the rain, Lucas crawled slowly toward the garden gate, his tiny hands gripping the wet wooden floor for balance. The sound grew louder, a quiet, desperate whimpering. When he reached the gate, Lucas looked through the gaps between the slats and saw something that made his heart beat faster. Inside a small, rusty metal cage was a German shepherd, soaked and trembling. The dog's fur was slick with rain, and its large, expressive eyes looked scared and tired. It paced slowly back and forth in the cramped space, clearly uncomfortable and anxious. The sight surprised Lucas, but he didn't cry or turn away. Instead, he reached out with a chubby hand, fingers stretching toward the dog. His expression was one of wonder mixed with concern, an unspoken connection forming in that quiet moment between boy and dog. The dog paused and looked at the baby, tilting its head slightly. There was a sadness in the animal's eyes, but also a flicker of hope. Lucas cooed softly, as if trying to say, "It's okay. I'm here." For a while, the two just stared at each other through the rain, locked in a silent understanding. The storm continued to pour, but under the porch, Lucas felt safe. And maybe, just maybe, the dog felt a little less alone. At that moment, the world outside was wild and wet, but inside that tiny interaction, something warm and bright was beginning to grow. The rain poured harder now, drumming like 1,000 tiny footsteps racing across the ground. The wind whipped through the trees, bending branches and sending leaves swirling like restless dancers. Yet beneath the porch's shelter, baby Lucas remained fixed on the small cage near the garden gate. His curiosity had turned to concern. The German shepherd inside the cage was no longer just a shadowy figure behind the wooden slats. Now, soaked and shivering, the dog's presence was impossible to ignore. Its soft whimpers grew louder, more urgent, as the storm continued to rage. The dog's pacing became frantic, back and forth, trapped with nowhere to go. Lucas watched closely, his small face pressed gently against the fence as the dog's eyes met his once again. The sadness in those eyes tugged at something deep inside the baby's heart, a feeling so pure and instinctive it needed no words, Although Lucas couldn't understand the dog's situation, he knew the dog was unhappy, and maybe, just maybe, needed help. Raindrops slid down the metal bars of the cage, and the dog shook itself, sending tiny sprays of water into the air. It was clear the cramped space wasn't protecting the German Shepherd from the storm. If anything, it made things worse. The dog's fur was matted and wet, its ribs showing faintly beneath the soaked coat. Around the neighborhood, the storm had driven most people indoors. Windows were closed, doors locked, and streetlights flickered as the weather grew harsher. But Lucas was still outside, focused entirely on the dog's plight. Something about the helpless animal had captured his attention so fully that the noise of the storm faded into the background. As he reached out again, this time with more urgency, Lucas's tiny fingers touched the cold metal bars of the cage. His hand trembled slightly from the chill in the air, but his eyes remained wide and steady. He didn't understand why the dog was locked up like this, or why it was alone in the rain. But the baby's instinct was clear. He wanted the dog to be safe, warm, and free. The German Shepherd stopped pacing and sat down, its breathing heavy but quieter. For a moment, it seemed to watch the baby as closely as Lucas watched it. The dog's ears twitched in the wind, and its tail gave a slow, cautious wag, a fragile sign of trust forming between two unlikely friends. Inside the house, Lucas's mother finally noticed his unusual focus by the garden gate. She came outside, umbrella in hand, and called softly, "Lucas, come inside. It's raining too hard." But Lucas didn't move. His attention was fixed on the dog, and his small voice began to coo gently, a sound of comfort and reassurance. His mother frowned, stepping closer to see what held him there so still. When she spotted the caged dog, her expression changed from curiosity to concern. The cage looked old and rusty, the dog clearly wet and scared. "Oh no," she whispered, worry coloring her tone. She hurried to the phone, dialing the number of the local animal shelter. Lucas, unaware of the phone call, continued to reach through the bars as if trying to touch the dog's heart. His innocence and kindness were raw and unfiltered. The baby's pure compassion, unburdened by fear or judgment, created a moment of connection that felt almost magical. Neighbors began to peek through their windows, noticing the small crowd gathering around the scene. A baby and a dog, both vulnerable in their own ways, caught in the middle of the storm. The story was simple but powerful, a reminder of empathy and hope even during the darkest weather. As the minutes ticked by, the rain showed no signs of slowing. But Lucas stayed steady, the baby who had discovered a desperate sound in the rain and had no intention of looking away. The storm raged on, the rain falling in heavy sheets that blurred the edges of the neighborhood. Thunder rumbled low in the distance, and the wind whipped the branches of trees like wild flags. But beside the garden gate, the scene was still, a baby locked in a silent conversation with a frightened dog trapped in a cage. The German Shepherd's breathing was uneven, a quiet, heavy pant that spoke of fear and exhaustion. The cage was far too small for such a large and strong dog. Its paws repeatedly pressed against the cold metal bars, desperate for escape, for relief, for even the smallest space of freedom. The relentless rain seeped through every crack and crevice, chilling the dog to its bones. The dog's eyes reflected the dim light, shining with a mix of hope and sorrow. They flickered nervously as the dog shifted its weight, looking for a comfortable spot that didn't exist. Its ribs were visible beneath the wet fur, a clear sign of neglect. The dog's coat, once surely proud and shiny, was now dull and clumped with mud and rain. Yet despite the discomfort, the German Shepherd held still for a moment, locking its gaze on the baby's outstretched hand. Something in that small, innocent gesture seemed to calm the dog, a rare moment of connection between two souls who didn't need words. Lucas, sitting on the damp wooden floor of the porch, felt an unspoken bond with the animal. His small fingers gripped the bars lightly, a gentle touch that said, "I see you. You're not alone." Though he didn't know the story of how the dog came to be caged in the pouring rain, the baby's pure heart was a beacon of comfort in the storm. Around them, the world continued to howl and splash with rain, but within that little space near the gate, time seemed to slow. Neighbors inside their homes paused their busy days to glance out windows, drawn by the unexpected sight of a baby so focused on a caged dog. At that moment, the dog let out a soft whine, almost a plea, that tugged at the heartstrings of anyone who heard it. It was a sound full of pain, loneliness, and hope, the silent cry of an animal longing for rescue. Lucas's mother returned from inside the house, now fully aware of the situation. She knelt beside her son, brushing raindrops from his curly hair, her eyes scanning the cage with concern. The rusty bars looked old and weathered, the lock barely holding together. She felt a knot tighten in her chest at the thought of the dog suffering alone in the rain. "Lucas, sweetie, let's get inside," she said softly, but her voice trembled with urgency. She pulled out her phone again, now calling the local animal rescue group. Her heart ached for the German Shepherd, the poor dog trapped and afraid, waiting for someone to come to its aid. Lucas, oblivious to the urgency of the moment, continued to reach toward the dog. His tiny fingers curled through the bars, brushing against the dog's damp fur. The dog responded by leaning its head gently against the baby's hand, a fragile sign of trust forming between them. The sight was powerful, a helpless baby offering comfort to a scared dog in a cage, a reminder of the goodness that can exist even in the darkest moments. Minutes passed, and the rain showed no sign of stopping. The dog, though frightened, began to settle slightly, soothed by the baby's gentle presence. The shivering slowed, replaced by soft, slow breaths. Meanwhile, neighbors began to gather at a distance, drawn by the unusual scene and the baby's steadfast attention. Some fetched towels and umbrellas, while others prepared to help however they could. The storm had brought hardship, but it had also brought the community together, united by a shared hope for the dog's safety. The German Shepherd's silent plea had been heard, not just by baby Lucas, but by an entire neighborhood ready to step in. And as the storm rumbled on, a quiet promise was made. No one would be left to suffer alone. The storm showed no sign of easing. Rain continued to pour in thick sheets, drumming against the rooftops and flooding the streets. The wind howled softly but fiercely, rattling windows and bending trees. Despite the chaos of the weather, one little boy sat quietly on the porch floor, his attention fixed on the caged German Shepherd just beyond the garden gate. Lucas, only 2 years old, didn't fully understand the storm or why the dog was trapped, but his heart told him something important. This dog was scared and alone, and it needed kindness. His wide eyes, filled with innocent empathy, didn't waver from the dog's damp, tired face. Without hesitation, Lucas reached through the rusty metal bars of the cage with his tiny hand, stretching his fingers toward the dog's fur. His touch was soft and uncertain but full of care, a simple gesture that spoke more loudly than words ever could. The German Shepherd's eyes softened at the touch. It leaned its head forward and rested it gently against the baby's hand. A fragile connection formed between two beings who had never met before but understood each other perfectly. Around them, the world was soaked in wild, but inside that small moment, there was peace. Lucas cooed softly, his voice barely louder than the raindrops around him. "It's okay," he seemed to say. "You're safe now." Though he couldn't speak the dog's language, his pure expression of kindness bridged the gap between human and animal. The baby's mother stood nearby, watching the scene unfold. Her eyes filled with tears as she witnessed her son's innocence and compassion. She felt a deep mix of pride and heartbreak, pride in her boy's big heart and heartbreak for the dog's suffering. "Sweetheart, come inside," she whispered gently, but Lucas didn't move. Instead, he kept reaching out, as if trying to comfort the dog in his own small way. Just then, a neighbor appeared at the edge of the porch, drawn by the baby's unusual focus and the dog's whimpering. Mrs. Thompson, a kind woman in her 50s known for her love of animals, knelt beside Lucas and smiled softly. "Looks like you found a friend," she said quietly. "That poor dog needs help." The baby turned his head slightly and babbled happily, his small hand still resting on the dog's head. Mrs. Thompson nodded to Lucas's mother, who was now on the phone, arranging for animal rescue. The baby's innocent act of reaching out had done more than comfort the dog. It had touched the hearts of everyone watching. It reminded them that sometimes the simplest gestures carry the deepest meaning. As minutes passed, more neighbors gathered, umbrellas in hand, waiting for the rescue team. Some wrapped blankets and towels, ready to warm the dog once freed. The community, moved by the baby's compassion, felt a renewed sense of purpose. Meanwhile, the dog remained calm under Lucas's gentle touch, its body relaxing slowly. For the first time that day, it seemed to believe that things might get better. Lucas's small hand continued to stroke the dog's wet fur, a quiet promise of friendship and care. The baby didn't know it yet, but this moment would be remembered by many, a shining example of kindness shining brightly even on the darkest days. The rain fell, the wind blew, but hope had taken root near the garden gate, sparked by a baby's innocent heart and a dog's silent plea. The rain kept falling relentlessly, the sky a sheet of gray and silver, streaked with lightning flashes that briefly lit up the soaked neighborhood. Yet near the garden gate, a small crowd had started to gather, drawn by the unusual sight of a baby locked in a silent bond with a caged German shepherd. Mrs. Thompson, the kindly neighbor who had arrived just moments ago, stood by Lucas's mother, both of them watching the dog shiver in the cold rain. The dog's cage was clearly far too small and rusted, and the heavy storm only worsened its discomfort. The sight made Mrs. Thompson's heart ache. "Don't worry, we're going to help him," she said softly to Lucas's mother, her voice steady with determination. She pulled out her phone and made a quick call to the local animal shelter. Within minutes, she had explained the situation: a large dog trapped in a cage during a storm, in need of urgent rescue. As she hung up, Mrs. Thompson looked over at the baby still reaching toward the dog. "You've got a good heart, little one," she said gently. Lucas's big eyes looked up, filled with innocent curiosity and an unspoken hope. The other neighbors who had started to notice the gathering began coming closer under umbrellas, some with towels and blankets in hand. The sense of community grew, strangers united by a shared concern for the helpless animal and the baby who had noticed him. Then a low rumble of a vehicle rolling up the wet street signaled that help was near. The local animal control officers arrived, wearing waterproof jackets and carrying specialized equipment to safely remove animals from difficult situations. Two officers stepped out of the truck and immediately approached the group. They were calm and professional, but the urgency in their eyes showed how seriously they took this rescue. One officer knelt down to Lucas's level, speaking softly. "Hey there, little guy. You found this dog, ah." Lucas giggled, reaching out again toward the dog. The officer smiled warmly and nodded to the others. "Let's get this dog out of the rain." The officers carefully examined the cage. The lock was old and rusted, but still holding strong. One of them pulled out bolt cutters and began working on the metal bars, sparks flying as they cut through the thick steel. The dog, sensing that the moment of freedom was near, grew quieter. It sat patiently, its large brown eyes watching the officer's every move, occasionally glancing at Lucas as if drawing courage from the baby's presence. Lucas's mother held him close, wrapping a small raincoat tightly around her son as the rain poured steadily. She whispered words of comfort, grateful that the rescue had finally arrived. The neighbors watched in silence, some holding their breaths as the cage door creaked open. The German shepherd hesitated at first, then stepped out slowly into the arms of one of the officers. The dog's soaked fur gleamed under the streetlights, and its tail wagged just a little, a hopeful sign of trust. The officer gently wrapped the dog in a warm blanket brought by one of the neighbors. The dog's eyes softened, and it leaned into the warmth, finally safe from the storm and the cage. Lucas reached out once more, this time touching the dog's damp muzzle with a delicate finger. The dog nuzzled the baby's hand in return, a quiet thank you that needed no words. As the officers prepared to take the dog to a nearby shelter, Mrs. Thompson smiled at Lucas's mother. "It's amazing what a little kindness can do," she said. "This baby noticed something no one else did, and now this dog has a chance." The rain continued to fall, but now it felt less harsh, as if the storm outside couldn't touch the warmth spreading among the small group of neighbors. The rescue was more than just about freeing a dog. It was a moment of hope, kindness, and connection. Lucas, still wrapped in his raincoat, waved goodbye to the dog as it was carried into the shelter van. The dog looked back once, eyes shining with gratitude and newfound trust. In that pouring rain, the baby's simple act of noticing and reaching out had changed a life. And it reminded everyone watching that even in the worst storms, hope can arrive on the footsteps of kindness. As the shelter van pulled away, its tires splashing water on the rain-soaked street, a quiet stillness settled over the neighborhood. The storm, though still heavy, no longer felt quite as ominous. The community had witnessed something rare and beautiful, a baby's simple gesture that sparked a chain of kindness and hope. Lucas sat on his mother's lap, wrapped snugly in a warm blanket, watching the van disappear down the street. His eyes, wide with wonder, reflected a feeling that even he couldn't yet name. There was comfort in knowing the dog was safe now, and maybe even happy. The baby's mother smiled softly, her heart full. She whispered gently to Lucas, "You helped save a life today, sweetheart." Though Lucas didn't understand all the words, his innocent smile was enough to fill the room with joy. Back at the animal shelter, the German Shepherd was given a warm bath, gentle food, and a cozy bed. The shelter staff immediately noticed how tired and hungry the dog was, but they also saw a spark of life in its eyes that had been missing before. The dog's story was still unknown, how it had ended up in a cage during a storm, abandoned and frightened, but there was hope now. Over the next few days, the dog's health improved. Its coat became shiny and clean, and the anxious pacing gave way to moments of calm and curiosity. The shelter workers named him Max, a strong, kind name for a dog that had endured so much but remained gentle. Meanwhile, word about Lucas's discovery spread throughout the neighborhood. Stories of the baby who noticed the caged dog in the pouring rain and refused to look away touched many hearts. Neighbors shared the story on social media, and soon people from nearby communities reached out, offering support for Max and the shelter. The baby's mother was overwhelmed by the response, but also proud. She knew that her little boy's innocent act had sparked something much bigger, a reminder of the power of empathy and kindness. One afternoon, a shelter volunteer contacted Lucas's family with exciting news. Max was ready for adoption, and they wanted to introduce the dog to the baby who had saved him. The day finally arrived for the meeting. Lucas's mother dressed him carefully, and the whole family drove to the shelter with a mix of excitement and nervousness. As they walked into the shelter's cozy visitor area, Max was brought out on a leash. The moment Max saw Lucas, his tail wagged energetically. The dog approached the baby slowly, sniffing the air and gently nuzzling the boy's hand. Lucas giggled, reaching out to pet Max's soft fur. The connection they had formed during the storm was still there, strong and real. The shelter staff watched with smiles as the two bonded. It was clear that Max had found not just safety, but a friend for life. After a short visit, the family made the decision that felt right in their hearts. They would adopt Max and give him the home he deserved, one filled with love, warmth, and the gentle touch of a baby who had seen his pain and reached out. The day Max left the shelter was full of promise. The rain had stopped, and the sun peeked through clouds, casting a golden light over the neighborhood. It felt like the world was celebrating this new beginning. At home, Max quickly settled into his new life. The cage was a distant memory as he explored the backyard, played with toys, and napped by the fireplace. Lucas and Max became inseparable companions, their friendship growing stronger each day. The baby's simple act of kindness had not only rescued a dog, but had brought joy and hope to everyone around them. Max quickly became a beloved member of Lucas's family, and the house, once quiet, was now filled with the joyful sounds of puppy paws and baby giggles. Every morning, Max waited patiently by the front door for Lucas to wake up. The baby, now a little more confident and curious, would crawl toward his furry friend, eager to start their day together. Their bond was unmistakable. Max was gentle and protective, always keeping a watchful eye on Lucas as he explored the world. He seemed to understand the baby's needs without words, nuzzling him when he was upset and playing softly when Lucas was happy. It was as if Max knew that his life had been saved by this tiny human, and he repaid that gift with endless loyalty. Lucas's mother often watched the two with a smile, feeling grateful that such a simple act, a baby's innocent reach through rusty bars in the rain, had changed all their lives forever. She sometimes caught herself marveling at the deep connection between child and dog, a friendship that grew stronger with each passing day. At the park, Max and Lucas were inseparable. Neighbors stopped to admire the pair, the tiny baby toddling alongside the large, gentle German shepherd. It was a beautiful sight, a living reminder of hope and healing. The story of Max's rescue had touched the whole community. Friends and strangers alike reached out to the family, asking how they could help with the ongoing care of animals in need. Inspired by the love between Lucas and Max, several neighbors even volunteered at the local shelter, bringing food, toys, and supplies to the dogs and cats waiting for their own second chance. As the seasons changed, Max thrived. The scars from his time in the cage faded, replaced by bright eyes and a happy spirit. He was no longer the frightened dog who shivered in the pouring rain. He was a vibrant, loving companion who found joy in every moment with Lucas. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with shades of pink and orange, Lucas sat on the porch with Max curled up beside him. The baby's small hand gently stroked Max's fur, and the dog rested his head on Lucas's lap. The quiet scene spoke volumes of healing, trust, and the purest kind of friendship. Lucas's mother joined them, wrapping a warm blanket around the pair. She whispered softly, "You two saved each other." It was true. Max had found a home and family to love him, and Lucas had gained a loyal friend who would always be by his side. The bond they shared was more than companionship. It was a lesson in kindness and resilience. Both had faced challenges, one abandoned and caged in the rain, the other a small child discovering the world. But together, they created something beautiful. Their story continued to inspire those who heard it. It was a reminder that even the smallest acts of compassion could make a difference, changing lives in ways no one could predict. As Max and Lucas grew, so did their adventures. From playing fetch in the backyard to exploring new places, their days were filled with laughter and discovery. And through it all, the memory of that rainy day, when a baby first reached out to a caged dog, remained a powerful symbol of hope. No matter what the future held, one thing was certain. Max and Lucas's friendship was unbreakable, a shining example of love born from kindness. Years passed, and the bond between Lucas and Max only grew deeper. What began as a fragile connection on a rainy day had blossomed into a lifelong friendship filled with countless memories, laughter, and love. Max was no longer just a rescued dog. He was a guardian, a playmate, and a cherished member of the family. Lucas, now a little older and full of curiosity about the world, had learned from Max the meaning of compassion. The baby who once reached through cold metal bars had grown into a kind-hearted child who understood that every creature deserved care and respect. Inspired by their story, Lucas's family became active advocates for animal welfare. They organized community events to raise awareness about neglected animals, partnered with local shelters to support rescue efforts, and shared their journey widely to encourage others to open their hearts and homes. Max, ever patient and gentle, continued to be a comforting presence in Lucas's life. The dog accompanied him on every adventure, from school trips to quiet evenings at home. Max's steady companionship gave Lucas confidence and joy, reminding him daily that love could heal even the deepest wounds. One spring afternoon, as the neighborhood gathered to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Max's rescue, Lucas stood in front of the crowd with a big smile. With Max sitting proudly beside him, the boy shared the story that had touched so many hearts. The story of a baby's simple act of kindness that saved a dog trapped in the pouring rain. The crowd listened intently, some with tears in their eyes. The tale wasn't just about rescue, it was about hope, community, and the power of seeing someone else's pain and choosing to help. After the story, a plaque was unveiled in the local park, a tribute to Max and Lucas, symbolizing the kindness that started with a baby's gentle hand. It was a reminder that even the smallest acts could create ripples of change that spread far beyond what anyone imagined. That day, Lucas looked at Max and felt proud. The dog's journey from a caged, frightened animal to a beloved family member was a testament to the strength of compassion and the importance of never turning away from those in need. As the sun set and the community celebrated, Lucas's mother hugged her son tightly. "You've made the world better, Lucas," she whispered, "and you always will." The legacy of that rainy day lived on, in the hearts of the people who cared, in the smiles of children learning kindness, and in the joyful why of a German shepherd's tale. Max and Lucas's story was proof that love, courage, and a simple act of reaching out could change lives forever. And in a world that sometimes felt harsh and cold, their friendship was a warm, shining light, a reminder that kindness always finds a way to grow.